Call of Duty Zombies has evolved a lot over the years, and not just recently. I mean, ever since the beginning, every single installment thereafter would add some kind of brand new sweeping innovation to the game that would evolve the mode in one direction or another. And where we are in Black Ops 6, compared to where we started in World at War, is insanely different. They are almost not even the same game anymore. But something different has happened to Zombies recently, not just a normal innovation game to game. There was a real fork in the road and a split somewhere, and it just happened to coincide after the release of Call of Duty Warzone. Now, this is something I've been thinking a lot about ever since I released my last Zombies video, and the #1 complaint or a big gripe that people seem to have with Black Ops 6 Zombies is that it's been so Warzoneified, or the Warzone influence has certainly had a toll on the game that, you know, it's kind of lost a lot of the aura and charm that old Zombies has had. Today, I want to investigate that question a little further because I want to figure out how much has Warzone influenced Zombies. Has Warzone influence on Zombies been entirely negative? What are some of the solutions to this problem? Because in a lot of ways, I agree. I think much of the identity of Call of Duty Zombies over the years has been obfuscated to Warzone, and especially after the last couple of games, you can certainly see that influence creeping more and more into the mechanics of the game, the structure, the looks, the visuals, etc. But before we can talk about where we are in Black Ops 6 and how we got here to this now Warzoneified Call of Duty Zombies, we need to go back to the beginning. Let's take a little bit of a trip down memory lane, go back to the beginning of Call of Duty Zombies, and let's watch the evolution over the years to find out how we got here exactly. In World at War in Black Ops 1, the game was incredibly simple from a conceptual standpoint, and not to mention, it did borrow a lot of assets and maps and even characters from the multiplayer. And I bring this up because a lot of people, when they say, oh, Zombies nowadays just reuses tons of assets from Warzone and it's basically built from Warzone parts, I get what they're saying, and it's not exactly wrong, but Zombies has been no stranger to borrowing assets. I mean, even in the golden era of Zombies, you know, in Black Ops 2 and 3, you know, stuff like that, they borrowed from the multiplayer quite heavily. I mean, the bows in Der Eisendrache, these are like one of the most iconic wonder weapons in Zombies. That's an asset ripped from the multiplayer. That's just like the bow multiplayer specialist, or even the dragon in Gorod Krovi is just a reskinned flamethrower, really. But the difference always was, in Zombies, 99% of the time, a reused asset or a mechanic from a different part of the game, the multiplayer or campaign, was typically always recontextualized, reskinned, and reworked to where it would fit a lot better in the context of Zombies. Like, of course, the Der Eisendrache bows are just basically made from the base mechanics of the multiplayer specialist bow. We all know that, but obviously they work almost nothing alike. Like, they're very different, of course, and so they fit Zombies a lot better despite them being built from a base layer of another part of the game. The point I'm making is that Zombies is no stranger to reusing parts of other modes. So to say that Black Ops 6, or even MWZ for that matter, just for the mere fact that it borrows things from Warzone makes it automatically bad, is not exactly the best argument. Now, it's always up to the case of how it's done is the big point of contention here, and that's what we're going to get into. After World at War and Black Ops 1, Zombies began to get a little more complicated with Black Ops 2. It became slightly more focused on quests. There were more intricate steps and details to the mechanics of how the quests work and everything, and so they were a bit more involved. There were a few new gameplay mechanics, but mostly it was still an open survival sandbox that was baked on tower defense gameplay. Black Ops 3 and 4 also introduced their fair share of brand new, unique mechanics to the mode that would continue to evolve it, and I don't love all of the changes that each respective game brought. Some of them were hit or miss, but they still felt like they were in service of Call of Duty Zombies as a mode for the most part, and this would all change once we got the release of Modern Warfare. Obviously, this is when Call of Duty Warzone came out, and the Zombies game to come out after the release of Warzone was Black Ops Cold War, and this is where we can really start investigating, because as far as our main topic is concerned, the Warzoneification of Zombies, this is the mode that becomes relevant. Everything I showed you in the previous Zombies games prior to Cold War was just to show what Zombies was before that time and what it looked like. Cold War is a very different take on Zombies in some ways and a return to form in others, but most clearly the Warzone influence has been shown in the weapon system and most particularly the HUD and quest system. Let's start with the HUD because this is the most obvious thing to look at immediately and see the Warzone influence, and we can pick apart a couple of things here. Now, the HUD in Call of Duty Zombies has always been important. Not only is it functional, like you need to know what's going on, it provides provides crucial information about the game, but also it can provide some kind of immersion or stylistic choice that makes you feel a certain way. The HUD in World at War in Black Ops 1 was incredibly simple. It was just like a normal blood splatter with essentially your ammo and grenades. That was it. It was very minimal, to the point, and fit the theme of Call of Duty Zombies, you know, for obvious reasons. In Black Ops 3, this would get a little bit more complex because they would start doing unique HUDs for different maps. Now, not every single map had its own unique HUD. That would have been cool, but you know, something like Shadows of Evil to the Giant, these had very different HUDs. The elements were more or less the same, like the same function, but from a stylistic perspective, they were different. And even if you didn't realize it at the time, the HUD would provide some kind of element of identity to the game. Now, let's move on to Black Ops 4, because this one is tricky. Black Ops 4 would start doing away with the unique HUDs that they had in BO3 for a more uniform approach, and while it still retains a lot of the functionality of what you need in Call of Duty Zombies, I personally think that the HUD in Black Ops 4 is where it all started to go downhill. This one was overly complicated and very ugly to look at for no real reason. This is where the problems began, because Call of Duty Zombies began to not only look ugly, but this became immersion breaking, in my opinion. Immersion is such a big part of gaming, and specifically zombies, and I think the, you know, massive amount of subtitles and all of these weird random HUD elements going on in BO4, their placement and style just didn't really complement the game, and it began to take you out of the experience a little bit. And I personally think one of the biggest roadblocks for Black Ops 4 that they could never quite overcome was its terrible HUD. This really was a setback, and it is something that the game struggled with its entire life cycle. Cold War would come around, and it would change a lot of what Black Ops 4 did. It would simplify the HUD much more, and it would bring it back to maybe a little bit more of like a minimalist look that maybe, say, Black Ops 1 had. Now, obviously, it's been stylized a bit differently, and this is the post-Warzone era of zombies. And while the HUD would be simplified in some ways, it would also become overly complicated in others. For example, we now have a minimap in the top left. You can obviously turn this off optionally, but it's on there by default, and I've personally never really understood the point of this minimap because, you know, in multiplayer or even Warzone, it makes sense given that you want to know where your enemies are. In zombies, that doesn't really matter because they come to you anyways, and, you know, knowing that there's zombies surrounding you isn't particularly helpful. Like, seriously, this is what your minimap can display sometimes. What am I supposed to do with this information? It's like, yes, I know there's zombies around. Like, what? I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. Also, the information that it's supposed to be displaying to me, I can clearly see with my own two eyes in my game, which, again, that's the whole point of the minimap, is to provide you information of stuff that you probably can't see with your own eyes at the moment. And interestingly, this reminds me of one of the very few conversations I ever had with David Vonderhaar, but I remember him talking about wanting to change the minimap in Call of Duty, specifically the multiplayer, because I remember him talking about the fact that he didn't like that 90% of the game, you're just looking at your minimap and then getting a kill and then flicking your eyes right back to your map. Like, you spend 90% of your match staring at the top left of the screen looking for little red dots. And I get where he's coming from, but in zombies, it's a very different mode, and I don't really see why a minimap exists, because you can't really do anything with the information that it gives you, at least in Modern Warfare Zombies, which we'll get to in a second, but that gives you a full map at the very least, so I can kind of see why that's a bit more functional. But in round-based zombies, specifically in Cold War and in Black Ops 6, I don't really get why a minimap is here. You know, even for like door icons, once again, it's like there's a door in front of me. I can self-evidently see that in the game. I don't need an icon telling me that's what it is. Out of all of the post-Warzone era Call of Duty Zombies gameplay changes, the minimap is the one that I think I understand the least, and I don't really agree with. Now, another big change from Warzone would obviously be its influence on the weapon system. Weapons in Cold War and Black Ops 6 and Modern Warfare Zombies as well are very different to how they worked pre-Warzone, because that was just essentially one standard weapon, and you would upgrade your weapon through either pack-a-punching maybe multiple times and stuff like that. However, now we have weapon rarities, and you also spawn in with essentially whatever weapon you want. You have your base rarity, which is either gray or red, going green, blue, purple, all the way up to orange or legendary, and every time you go up a tier in rarity, like an attachment would be added, and also your weapon damage would flat out increase. You would just get better base damage on maybe the same weapon if it was base versus legendary. It'd be a huge difference. So in some ways, your choice of weapon didn't matter as much as the rarity of that weapon, and that was a big change, obviously coming from Call of Duty Warzone, because they had the same weapon rarity system going on there. However, that system was probably inspired inspired by Fortnite, so really you can trace it all the way back to that game. I think that this new weapon rarity system in Call of Duty Zombies and the way that weapons function now can be traced all the way back to Fortnite, and whether that's good or not for the game is certainly up for debate. But what it does, on the one hand, is actually extend the sense of progression you get match to match, because traditionally in Zombies, you would get a gun out of the box, you would get 5,000 points, upgrade it, and you're done. There's not much else to do with your weapon other than that. But now, you could say that the extension of the Pack-a-Punch system and also weapon rarity takes care of that problem, and I do think that's the positive aspect to this, because upgrading not only your rarity, but also your Pack-a-Punch tier is a way to, you know, extend that feeling of progression and getting more powerful that feels so satisfying in Call of Duty Zombies. So while, yeah, sure, it maybe feels a little goofy to have a system that was inspired by Fortnite in Zombies, I do think it has maybe a few positive elements. This loadout system affects so many other elements of the game, and also in particular what you spawn in with. You know, a big thing in the Zombies community has been missing the fact that we start with a little pistol, and people go, bro, but you can just select a pistol on your loadout and start with it. But I think both people are just clearly missing each other's point. It's not about the literal fact of starting with a pistol. We've been over this. That's not really what it's about. It's about having a weak weapon that you were always at a severe disadvantage to the zombies for a very long time. The pistol in Zombies was pretty much useless, like actually useless. The only thing it really did was allow you to get a couple of points to maybe start getting weapons that were usable. Otherwise, the pistol was pointless. You can use a pistol or spawn in with one in modern Zombies games, but it's not the point because it's actually usable. You know, you can do just fine with it, and you don't have to get rid of it like you feel like you have to ditch your starting pistol very early on in early Zombies games. This has obviously been as a result of the Warzone influence of the weapon loadout system. The other thing that changed is the fact that we will probably most likely never see double tap again, and the reason for that is this extended weapon damage progression system from base rarity all the way up to epic is essentially the replacement for double tap. Now, the removal of double tap is not a Warzone era COD thing. The first Zombies to get rid of double tap was Black Ops 4, and if you need more evidence of this new weapon system being the reason they got rid of it, Black Ops 4 is the first one to change how the Pack-a-Punch system works. You had to upgrade 4 separate times to achieve max damage, and that's what they wanted you to do instead of just buying double tap. And so obviously that didn't work, and it doesn't work in Cold War either, so we'll never see it in Black Ops 6 most likely either, or if we do, it will be significantly reworked. Weapons are fundamentally different in the Warzone era of COD than they were pre-Warzone, and that's a direct result of what that game mode was doing. Another thing that was a direct result of what Warzone was doing is actually armor. This is another thing people aren't so happy about, and I have conflicted feelings on this because in some ways, I don't think it's a replacement for the zombie shield. I've seen that a lot. People go, man, can we just get like a regular zombie shield back instead of armor? I don't know if those are exactly the same thing. Kind of yes, but also sort of not. It's more just an extension of the health system. Armor now is essentially what Juggernog is. Like, Jug is useful, but it's not really like the big thing that you want to get every single match. I mean, Jug is one of the best perks in traditional Zombies, and it's good in Cold War, and even in Black Ops 6, it's fine, but it's not really what you need to stay alive. It's more bigger armor vests and more armor. Now, the thing is, armor is directly influenced because of what Warzone is doing, and I talked to Treyarch about this because I pointed out how in Cold War, all you need to do to apply armor is walk over one of the, you know, little drops that maybe will come out of a zombie, and it automatically applies to you. That's no longer the case in Modern Warfare Zombies and in Black Ops 6. You have to manually plate like you would in Warzone. And I asked Treyarch, just out of my own curiosity, I was like, so what was the decision to make you now have to manually plate your armor instead of just picking up drops like you do in Cold War? And they said, well, don't you guys want the game to be a little harder? And I get what they're saying. I guess my entire point with the armor system and health is that what made the game harder in older zombie titles was that you had to be really careful with your positioning. The thing with Juggernog being the biggest benefit to your health was that what mattered is how you move around the zombies and trying to take the least amount of hits possible. Obviously, your health will restore after not getting hit for a certain period of time, so it's trying to figure out moment to moment how you can train the zombies and avoid getting hit. Your positioning had to be a lot more thoughtful and deliberate. Ever since Cold War and past this up to Black Ops 6, your positioning in Zombies is still important, and moving movement and training is also important, but it's not quite as emphasized as it used to be in older zombie games. We now have 3 zombie games where we need to apply armor, and that would be Cold War, MWZ, and Black Ops 6. The health system in zombies has changed a little bit, and even in Black Ops 4, we had a weird system where when that game launched, we had 150 health, and it was supposed to be because you're supposed to be a bit more reliant on your specialist weapon, and it did have zombie shields and stuff. Black Ops 4 was weird. That was a strange health system that I didn't love either, but the armor system is obviously more simplified for the general player to understand, but my question is it always the best choice for zombies? I don't know. Now, you can look at Cold War and see all of the Warzone influence from the gameplay systems to the HUD and so on, but it still is zombies at the end of the day, and at its core, it's a round-based zombies game. And for the most part, in my opinion, still had the feel of Call of Duty Zombies at its heart. This would begin to get kind of weird when Modern Warfare 3 came out, because we got introduced to MWZ. Now, this was by no means advertised as like a classic Call of Duty Zombies mode. They knew that this was very strange, and if you want to talk about zombies getting Warzoneified, this is the prime example. And I mean, that's not exactly a secret either. MWZ is literally just zombies on the Warzone map. Like, it's Warzone zombies. That's what the mode is. So it's not really trying to hide it, but I mean, when you look at all of the systems with weapon rarity, but most particularly even the HUD, if you look at the bottom left of Black Ops 6 and MWZ, they are exactly the same. Even in Cold War, sure, it had a very Warzone looking HUD, but even this bottom left, like, player name card was still a little different to Warzone. Like, it felt, I guess, distinct in some ways, but this is identical. And I think in Black Ops 6, this is what a lot of people have problem with the HUD, and I guess myself included. Earlier, when we talked about zombies taking elements and aspects from other parts of the game, the campaign or the multiplayer, and recontextualizing it and spinning it in a way that serves the identity of zombies being a good thing, that's what I really wish they would do here. For MWZ, look, I get it. Like, it is literally the Warzone map. It's Warzone zombies. I understand. Have the HUD like this. That's fine. But Black Ops 6 is this return to form, this round-based zombies experience that's supposed to be its own thing now. So why do we still have the Warzone HUD? I get they want to make it accessible, but does that really mean we need to have the exact same HUD in the bottom left player cards that we do in Warzone? I mean, these could be zombified just a little bit. Even, I talked about this before, but when you get into the Mangler suit in BO6, you get an entirely different HUD with an actual like player card icon, this little portrait, and a, you know, cool looking health bar. This should be what the default player HUD is. And, you know, you might say in Black Ops 6, well, hang on, Chop, because we're going to have all of these HUD presets, a fully customizable HUD, all of this stuff. And sure, we don't know the full extent of what's included in this, but a lot of it is just changing the size and the position and the shape of the HUD. The ability to customize the HUD is no replacement for art direction. If they really want to beat the Warzoneification of zombies allegations, I think you actually need to have some kind of very unique, identifiable look to the mode. Like, I don't want to look at the bottom left and just see Warzone. And you know, that doesn't help its case for the fact that people say that zombies doesn't really have any atmosphere in Black Ops 6. I'm going to get to that in just a second. My point with the HUD is that they don't need to change the entire game of Black Ops 6 and what it is. You can have the HUD display the same functions as what you need to do, player health, points, armor, etc., but make it look distinctly zombies. That would go a very long way into making this mode feel better and identifiable. And not to mention, it would do wonders for player immersion. A lot of the people are upset at Liberty Falls because this map has no real atmosphere. It's, you know, a lot of people compare it to Outbreak or Warzone zombies or whatever. And I really understand what they're getting at. I think a lot of it does have to do with the HUD and a lot of the weapon systems and, you know, all of these new minimap additions and even like objective markers, all this stuff. I get the mode is supposed to be accessible, and that's not necessarily a problem. I just think that how it's done is not necessarily the most tactful. A lot of people don't think Liberty Falls has very much atmosphere, and I've been thinking about this a lot. I've seen people suggesting that they just need to smear all of Liberty Falls with dark ether energy and change the skybox and make it dark. I don't think that adding atmosphere to a zombies map is as simple as throwing in a different skybox. Sure, that's an element, but there's so much more that goes into atmosphere in Call of Duty Zombies than just just what the skybox or the lighting looks like. Sure, that's an element, but it's a much smaller piece to a far bigger puzzle. Atmosphere can be down to how a match begins. When you load a zombies map and you see that black screen and then you hear the click of the starting pistol before it fades into color, that's something that really sets the tone. Like, that's Der Eisendrock is a great example of that. You hear the music begin as you fade into the map. That's awesome. Atmosphere can also be things like radios and quotes and just little pieces of environmental storytelling, music stings. There's so much that goes into setting the tone and feel of zombies than just, oh, what the skybox looks like. I get why people are upset at Liberty Falls and that it has no aura, quote unquote, and in some ways I agree, some ways I think are actually quite fixable. Cold War Outbreak had a similar problem with Sanatorium. So this was a region that was a multiplayer map that was fully bright and sunny. Obviously in MP that makes sense. And they tried to like zombify it by just making it dark. They applied a nighttime skybox and then some kind of weird filter over it that made the visibility very dark. And I hated the way this map looked. Sanatorium was one of my least favorite, regions to play in Outbreak because it just looked so ugly. And it didn't add any atmosphere because of that. Sure, it's at nighttime, but it didn't feel any more zombies to me. Again, the things that make zombies have an atmosphere are way more than just one simple skybox or filter. And I'm also not suggesting that they just smear everything with dark ether. That's kind of what they ended up doing later in MWZ. Basically, every story mission is just lathered in dark ether, and I don't think that's a problem inherently. I actually like the dark ether and I love its aesthetics, but I think the dark ether is best used sparingly, using it when it's really effective, and I think that Cold War did a good job of that. Look, it's no secret that Call of Duty Zombies has been heavily influenced by Warzone, and some of the changes I truly believe were positives for the game mode. For example, I know a lot of people don't like the fact that the zombies now say zombie above it and have a health bar, and then, you get like number pop-ups when you kill them. I get why people don't like that, and I understand that it doesn't feel like traditional zombies in that way, but I kind of like it. I'm just going to be honest, I don't mind it so much. I think the health bar thing can be somewhat useful, and I just think it's kind of satisfying to look at. I know it's not exactly the identity of zombies, but that's one of those changes that I really don't mind and kind of prefer, in all honesty. Look, I'll wrap with this because I know Treyarch wants to make Black Ops 6 in a super accessible game mode, and I know that Activision and Treyarch and everybody like that would like to have more Warzone players playing zombies. That feels like the entire point of Warzonifying zombies is to make this mode more appealing to, the more broader audience. But I don't want them to lose themselves in what Warzone is, to where you're making sacrifices for the sake of Warzone when maybe that's not the best choice for zombies. And I think there's a lot of cases where, yeah, maybe this works for Warzone, but is that the best choice for Call of Duty Zombies being a very different game mode? I'm not really so sure about that, but I just don't want them to lose themselves in that, if that makes sense. And so I think the thing to end on here is that if you make a game for everybody, you end up making a game for no one. They've got to draw a line in the sand somewhere. I get that Warzone elements are always going to affect Call of Duty Zombies. That's just where we are right now, and some of them, again, have been very positive in my opinion, but you do have to draw the line at some point. Warzone cannot essentially overtake what the identity of Call of Duty Zombies from the beginning has been. The closest we got to that was MWZ, and while it's fun in its own right, it's certainly not exactly zombies. I do think that Black Ops 6 Zombies still has a chance to rectify a lot of these, Warzone elements that have certainly bled into the game. It's not too late for many of these to be adjusted. I just hope that the ones that do need to be adjusted end up getting the treatment they need, and the things that have been positive changes can stick around for the future. But in your opinion, what has been the biggest change that Warzone has influenced in Call of Duty Zombies, and has it been a positive thing or a negative thing for you? Let me know down below. Leave a like on the video, subscribe if you're new to the channel for more Black Ops 6 Zombies, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.